What happens when the man who signs the paycheck starts stocking shelves and no one knows he's the boss? Darren Ashford stood in front of the mirror in a run-down motel just outside town, adjusting his name badge. Ron, it read in block letters. Old work boots, worn jeans, a faded hoodie. Nothing about him said CEO of a multi-million-dollar grocery chain. He'd bought the company 7 years ago from an older couple ready to retire, and since then expanded it to 7 locations across the state. The stores were profitable, customer numbers were steady, but complaints had started to trickle in, not about products, but people. Employee turnover was climbing. Last month, a customer review mentioned how a kind old worker was being barked at like a dog by a manager. Darren didn't ignore things like that. Still, he didn't want to rely on reports anymore. If something was wrong, he had to see it himself. He picked Store 4 because it was the busiest and also had the highest turnover rate. He'd never met the staff there personally. It was a big enough company that he didn't know everyone, and they'd never seen him in person either. Especially not like this. He interviewed for a part-time stocker job under the name Ron Whitlow. The store manager, a guy named Travis, barely glanced at his resume. 3 shifts a week, plus weekends if you want more hours, Travis had said, tapping a pen on his desk. You'll be lifting. You good with that? Darren had nodded. Absolutely. Now, on his first shift, he stepped into the back room at 6 a.m. sharp. A young woman with a tight ponytail handed him a pair of gloves. Hey, new guy, she said. I'm Jody. Stick with me for now. Appreciate it. The energy in the store was tense, not frantic, just tight, like everyone was trying not to mess up. Darren stocked the cereal aisle with Jody, both of them moving fast before the store opened at 7. She was sharp, efficient, polite, but quiet. You been here long? He asked. 2 years, she said, barely looking up. Longest out of anyone back here. That meant something. Later in the morning, while wheeling out a pallet of canned goods, Darren heard raised voices from the dairy section. He paused at the end of an aisle. A tall man with a tight buzz cut was standing over an older worker, maybe late 60s, thin, wearing a back brace. Harold, we've talked about this, the man snapped. You can't keep slowing down the team. If you can't keep up, don't come in. I'm doing my best, sir, Harold said, his voice low. Your best isn't enough, the man barked. You've been on this aisle for over an hour. It's 6 crates of yogurt. What are you doing, writing poetry on each one? A couple customers nearby glanced over, uncomfortable. Harold's hands shook as he tried to lift another crate. Darren felt something tighten in his gut. He stepped forward. Need a hand here? He asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. The supervisor turned to him, annoyed. No, this doesn't concern you. I'm Ron, new stocker. Then keep stocking, Ron. Harold didn't say a word. Just kept lifting, slow and careful. Darren walked away, fists clenched. He wasn't ready to blow his cover. Not yet. But that wasn't something he was going to forget. By noon, he'd already seen more than enough. A cashier getting snapped at for asking for her break. A cart wrangler getting ignored when he asked for gloves. But it wasn't all bad. Jody worked hard and helped everyone without being asked. Darren also noticed a young guy named Illy who stayed late on his break to help an elderly customer find their car during a sudden downpour. Another woman, Gloria in her 40s, helped a nervous teen cashier through her first rush without losing patience. These were the people keeping the place running. Darren's shift ended at 3 and he left without saying much. But he didn't head back to the motel. He drove across town to Store 6, where the district manager's office was. He knocked once, then let himself in. Hey, Darren, said the district manager, a tired-looking man named Vince. Darren sat down. Vince, I need every schedule, every complaint, and every promotion record from Store 4 for the past year. Vince blinked. Everything okay? No, and don't tell anyone I was there. He left before Vince could ask anything else. That night, Darren lay on the motel bed, staring at the ceiling. He had one hand behind his head, the other resting on his chest. Maybe he'd let this place run too long without checking in. Maybe he'd put too much faith in the wrong people. He wasn't sure yet. But he was going back in tomorrow, and this time he'd be watching a lot closer. The next morning, Darren arrived earlier than scheduled. The store lights were still dim, the parking lot nearly empty. He stood outside the employee entrance, sipping burnt coffee from the gas station across the street, watching workers trickle in one by one. Most wore the same worn-out expressions, tired, alert, guarded. A young guy in a hoodie walked past him without a word. A woman with 2 kids in the backseat of her car dropped them off with someone in the lot before rushing in, not even glancing up. Everyone moved like they were trying to be invisible. At 6 sharp, he stepped inside. Jody was already sorting through inventory sheets near the stockroom. She glanced up. "Didn't think you'd come back," she said. "I said I would." She tossed him a box cutter. "All right. Paper towels and soap aisle today. Grab a cart." Within an hour, Darren noticed something strange. Half the pallets weren't where they were supposed to be, labels mismatched, half the shipments opened but not logged. A clipboard had items marked as received that clearly weren't anywhere in the back. He turned to Jody. "Who handles inventory logging here?" "Technically Travis," she said, not looking up. "But he hasn't been in the back in nearly 2 weeks. Sometimes he tells Illy to do it." "Illy?" "Yeah, the kid who helped that old guy yesterday." "He's not supposed to, but no one else wants to touch it." Darren nodded slowly. It explained why things were disorganized. A 20-year-old part-timer doing a supervisor's job off the books. When the store opened, Travis finally arrived. He didn't come in through the back, but through the front door, coffee in hand, chatting on his phone. He didn't acknowledge a single worker as he passed by. Darren kept working, but he noticed how Travis moved through the store brisk, loud, constantly checking his watch, never stopping to lift or fix anything himself. He barked at the floor cleaner for missing a corner, then walked away before the guy could respond. By 10, the store was packed and the front end was overwhelmed. 3 checkout lanes open, lines stacking deep. A young cashier, maybe 17, looked like she was about to cry. Her scanner kept jamming. Darren saw her raise her hand for help. No one came. He slipped into the next aisle and asked a woman in produce, "Who's the front-end lead today?" "Gloria," she said. "But she's covering self-checkout and customer service alone." Darren walked past the registers and saw Gloria jogging between kiosks, helping one customer with a card issue, another with a return. She looked exhausted but focused. "Hey," he said, stepping closer. "That girl on register 2's in trouble, scanner's glitching." Without missing a beat, Gloria nodded. "Tell her I'm coming." She moved quickly, calm but firm, and Darren stepped back. She didn't hesitate. She didn't complain, just solved problems. When he circled back to the break room, he found Illy sitting alone at a table, eating from a brown paper bag. Darren sat across from him. "You're Illy, right?" "Yeah, people say you're the one logging inventory." Illy looked up, eyes wary. "I mean, sometimes. When it doesn't get done. You trained on that?" "No, I just figured it out. Someone had to do it." "You getting paid more?" Illy laughed once. "They said they'd review it in 3 months. That was 6 months ago." Darren leaned back slightly, trying to keep his expression level. "You ever talk to Travis about it?" "Tried once. He said I should be grateful to be trusted." Darren didn't respond. He just stood and tossed his coffee cup in the trash. That afternoon, 2 elderly women entered the store together. Gloria greeted them at the door by name. Darren watched from the cleaning aisle as she walked them to the pharmacy, chatting warmly the whole way. He noticed something else too. Harold wasn't on the floor. He asked Jody about it. "Travis cut his hours again," she said. "Why?" Said he's too slow. "Gave his shifts to his cousin." "His cousin?" "Yeah, some guy who's been here 2 weeks, always on his phone, doesn't even clock out for breaks." Darren didn't say anything, just picked up a broom and started sweeping the back aisle. Later, while unloading a shipment, he caught sight of Travis again. This time, the manager was in the back room, pacing with his phone to his ear, yelling about someone not pulling their weight and threatening to write up the entire team if he had to. He ended the call, turned, and saw Darren. "You finished the bleach aisle?" Just about. Good. Tomorrow I want you in Frozen. Don't take all day. We're not running a charity. Darren nodded once and walked past him. That night, Darren sat in his truck outside the store for a long time. The sun had already set and the parking lot was nearly empty. He stared at the building, jaw tight. He pulled out his phone and called Vince. Fire Travis, effective immediately. Vince didn't hesitate. Understood. Darren ended the call and sat in silence for another minute. The next morning, he arrived again. This time, he wore a solid navy button-up and slacks, still plain but different enough to stand out. The team was already gathering in the break room for the morning meeting. Confusion spread across faces when he stepped in. Travis wasn't there. Vince followed close behind, holding a clipboard. Darren looked around the room. Every face turned to him. He didn't introduce himself right away. Instead, he looked at Gloria. "How many people report to you directly?" She hesitated. "About 9. How many hours are you scheduled for?" 32. "You're doing the work of a department manager. Effective today, you're being promoted and moved to salary. Full benefits. You'll have an assistant by next week." Her eyes widened. "Wait, who are you?" He turned to the group. "My name is Darren Ashford. I own this company." Silence hit the room like a dropped pallet. "I've been working here for the past few days undercover. I've seen too much not to act." He looked at Ellie. "You've been doing work outside your job description without recognition or compensation. That ends today. You're being moved to inventory specialist with a raise and proper training." Ellie blinked. "Seriously, you earned it." He turned to Jody. "You've carried this team longer than anyone here. Starting next week, you'll be the new floor lead. You'll get the hours, the title, and the authority." She didn't speak, just nodded, stunned. Darren's tone shifted. "I also saw things that won't be tolerated: disrespect, verbal abuse, corner cutting. That stops now. Travis is gone. Any manager who speaks to staff the way I saw yesterday will be removed immediately. If you don't treat people with dignity, you don't work here." No one said a word. "I'm not here to make a speech. I'm here to fix a culture that failed while I wasn't looking. But I'm looking now." He stepped back. "Vince will be here for the next week. I'll be back regularly and not as a stranger." As he left the break room, Gloria followed him out. "Mr. Ashford," she said, "can I say something?" "Of course. I've worked in retail 29 years. Nobody's ever done anything like that. I don't know how long you'll stay involved, but thank you. I should have done it sooner." She nodded once and returned to the floor. Darren stepped outside and took a long breath. The store wasn't fixed, not yet. But it was finally facing the right direction. The next day, Darren arrived at Store 4 just before opening, this time through the front entrance. He wore the same plain clothes as before, but without the name tag. The air inside felt different. Not relaxed, nothing changed overnight, but the tension that had once clung to every aisle seemed to have thinned. People were still moving quickly, but now with occasional glances toward one another, as if wondering, what else is about to change? Gloria was already walking the front end, clipboard in hand. She paused when she saw him. "I set up a rotation to cover breaks today," she said. "It's not perfect, but it'll keep the lines from stacking up." Darren nodded. "You shouldn't have to make it work with a broken schedule." "I know. But until we're fully staffed, it's about holding things together." He appreciated the honesty. "I've got HR reviewing applications. We'll start interviews next week." She glanced over her shoulder. "Might want to talk to the new guy Travis hired last. His cousin. He's been late 3 days in a row and left the cooler door open yesterday." Darren didn't ask for a name. He just made a mental note. By mid-morning, he was in the stockroom reviewing the layout. The place was still cluttered. Weeks of mismanaged inventory didn't disappear overnight, but at least now it wasn't getting worse. Illy had stayed after his shift the day before to help reorganize the dry goods section, and someone had finally labeled the freezer crates properly. He walked to the time clock and found a young woman punching in. She looked barely out of high school, wearing oversized black glasses and a baggy sweatshirt with the sleeves rolled up. "You knew?" he asked. "Yeah, my name's Tasha. Today's my first shift." You get any real training yet? She shrugged. A guy named Caden said I'd be on register, then he just pointed and told me to watch what the other girl does. Darren frowned. You comfortable with that? I mean, I've worked register before, but… She trailed off, then added, I'd like to know the rules. What I'm allowed to say, what I'm not, stuff like that. Stay close to Gloria. She'll make sure you're not left guessing. Tasha gave him a cautious smile. Thanks. Darren walked to the employee board near the break room. The schedule had been updated with Gloria's name listed as front lead, and Ellie's new title had been added as well. It was a start, but not everything was moving in the right direction. At around noon, he walked past the deli counter and noticed a tall man leaning against the back wall, arms folded, scrolling through his phone. It was the cousin. A crate of sandwich meat sat out on the prep table, unwrapped. Several customers waited at the counter, glancing around like they weren't sure where to go. The employee behind the glass, a woman in her early 50s with salt and pepper hair, was slicing cheese and ringing up orders at the same time. Darren stepped closer. You need help back there, he asked her. The woman glanced up briefly. Not unless you can clone me. He turned to the man against the wall. You work here? Yeah. You on break? No. You know that meat's been sitting out for at least 15 minutes. The man looked at the crate like he hadn't seen it before. I was gonna get to it. Darren stepped around the counter and opened the cooler. You've got product sitting at unsafe temps in front of customers. That's not gonna get to it, that's risking someone's health. The man put his phone in his pocket, annoyed. Who are you? Someone who expects employees to do their jobs. You don't get to talk to me like that. Darren turned to the woman behind the counter. What's your name, Marcy? How long have you been holding this section down on your own? Since 8. He showed up at 9, but he's barely touched anything. Darren didn't look at the man again. He just said, You're done here. What? You're being terminated right now. You can gather your things and leave through the back. The man laughed like he thought it was a joke. Darren looked him dead in the eye. You're being let go for negligence, endangering customer safety, and failure to perform assigned tasks. You don't need to agree, you just need to go. The man stared for a moment, then turned and left without another word. Darren looked back at Marcy. You'll get a second person by tomorrow. I'll have someone from store 6 cover until we hire. She nodded once, then went back to slicing cheese. The rest of the day was relentless. A delivery truck arrived at the wrong time and blocked the loading dock. A customer slipped on a leak near the frozen aisle, and Jody had to sprint to get a caution sign down. Darren helped a vendor navigate the back hall because no one had updated the delivery map in 3 months. By 5, he caught Vince near the front, clipboard in hand. I want a new department head for deli by end of week, Darren said. Marcy's doing the work, but she doesn't want the title. I've got someone in mind from store 2. Solid record, good with people, bring them in. Don't just transfer problems. As Vince walked off, Darren saw Lee crouched near the canned goods, reorganizing a bottom shelf. His shirt was damp with sweat and his eyes were red. You all right? Darren asked. Lee stood slowly. Yeah. Just tired. You were supposed to be off 2 hours ago. I stayed because the scanner system glitched again. Gloria couldn't get the labels to print, so I rigged a workaround. You're not required to fix tech issues. I just didn't want the aisle to stay empty. Darren exhaled. Go home. Take tomorrow off, paid. Lee hesitated, then finally nodded. Thanks. As he left, Darren walked to the front to check on the registers. The lines were steady but manageable. Gloria stood near the self-checkout, coaching Tasha through a refund. You can't cancel a payment once it's gone through, she said gently. But you can process a return and issue store credit if they don't have the receipt. Tasha asked, what if a customer gets mad? Keep your voice calm, stick to the policy. And always call me if someone gets aggressive. Darren waited until the customer left, then stepped forward. You're a teacher, he said quietly. Gloria glanced at him. You want cashiers to last longer than 2 weeks. You train them like they matter. He nodded slowly. You'll have a full-time assistant by Friday. I already started shadowing one of the girls from bakery. She's smart. Just needs time, give her that. The sun was low in the sky when Darren finally stepped outside. He stood near the carts, watching a father help his young son load a few grocery bags into the trunk. The store lights buzzed behind him, and somewhere inside, the intercom played a soft instrumental tune that barely covered the noise of carts and conversation. He wasn't proud of how far things had slipped, but he was proud of how quickly the right people started rising when given the chance. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to the regional hiring lead. Open 3 positions at Store 4 immediately. Prioritize experience, but don't overlook attitude. He watched the parking lot for another minute, then walked to his truck, already thinking about what needed to happen next. The store couldn't be rescued by speeches or firings alone. It had to be rebuilt one shift, one person, one earned promotion at a time. By the time Darren stepped back into Store 4 the following week, the place had taken on a different rhythm, not fixed, not smooth, but noticeably steadier. He didn't announce his arrival. He didn't need to. Word had spread fast after the reveal, and now when he walked the aisles, staff glanced up not with fear but with a kind of watchfulness, unsure of what he might do next. He wasn't there for ceremony. He was there to close the loop. Gloria was posted near the front, clipboard tucked under her arm, speaking with a woman Darren didn't recognize, late 30s, sharp eyes, wearing a navy polo with a name badge that read Tanya. She was listening, not talking, which was a good sign. Darren waited until they finished. "Is that the hire from Store 2? He asked once Tanya walked off. Gloria nodded. "She shadowed me 2 days, knows her way around food safety protocols, doesn't cut corners, quiet but solid. You think she's ready to take over deli? She already started fixing their temp logs." He nodded. "Let her run with it, but review her numbers weekly for the first month." Already planned to. Darren noticed something else. The floor wasn't just cleaner, it was being maintained. Shelves weren't perfectly stocked, but they weren't chaotic either. Customers weren't wandering around looking for help. A young man near bulk goods was actively offering assistance, not just waiting to be approached. In the stockroom, Darren found Ali entering counts into a tablet, carefully cross-checking incoming inventory with the manifest. His steps were slower than before, but not from fatigue, more like someone who didn't have to do 5 things at once anymore. "You settling into the new role?" Darren asked. Ali looked up. "Yeah. It's more responsibility, but at least I know what I'm responsible for now. Any gaps still hitting you hard? The frozen section still needs a reliable closer. Right now, people rotate through, but no one owns it. I'll fix that." Ali hesitated, then added, "Also, the scanner software is still glitching. I've reported it, but it gets pushed down the queue." Darren narrowed his eyes. "You reported it to IT twice. I'll escalate it myself." Ali nodded, then went back to work. Darren didn't interrupt him further. At the loading dock, Tanya was inspecting a late shipment. One of the delivery drivers, a man with a clipboard and a defensive posture, was trying to explain why the frozen goods were showing up thawing at the edges. Tanya didn't raise her voice, but she didn't let him off either. "You're 3 degrees over the threshold and 45 minutes past window," she said clearly. "We can't accept this." The driver pushed back. "It's not like I control the refrigeration unit. Then your company needs to send someone who does. I'm not risking food safety because your truck's behind schedule." The man tried to argue again, but Darren stepped in. She said no. "That decision stands." The driver looked between them, then gave a short nod and returned to the truck. Tanya exhaled. "I didn't know if I was allowed to reject it." "You are. And you just set the tone for how we handle vendors from now on." "Good, because I'm not serving spoiled food just to hit quota." Inside, Jody was on the floor, training a new hire on how to break down overnight pallets. The new kid, 18, maybe 19, was wide-eyed but attentive. Jody spoke in short, clear sentences, showing instead of telling. Darren waited until she finished before stepping over. "Your running point now," she shrugged. "They keep assigning new hires to me." I guess that means I am. You want that to be official? Jody didn't answer immediately. I want structure. If I'm leading, I want the tools and the backing. Otherwise, it's just babysitting with extra pressure. You'll get both. Starting next schedule, you're the official mid-shift floor lead. You'll train, you'll coordinate restock, and you'll get override access. She gave a single nod. Then I'm in. As Darren turned to leave, he saw something that made him pause. Near the express lane, Harold was bagging groceries, carefully, steadily, with the same slow precision as before. But now, no one was rushing him. He was paired with a younger cashier, Tasha, the new girl who seemed to naturally pace with him, adjusting without a word. Darren waited until the customer walked off before approaching. "Harold," he said gently. The older man looked up, startled at first. "Mr. Ashford? You asked to stay on despite reduced hours. That's still what you want?" "Yes, sir. I'm not trying to retire yet, not if I can still do something useful." "You're doing more than that. Starting next week, I want you as store ambassador. 1 shift a day, greeting customers, assisting anyone who needs help navigating the store. No heavy lifting, no pressure." Harold blinked. "You're serious?" "I wouldn't say it if I wasn't. I never thought I'd be offered something like that. You earned it. You've stayed through worse. Now we need you for better." Darren moved on quickly, not because he was in a hurry, but because he didn't want to make a moment out of something that deserved to be normal. Near the break room, he found Vince talking with a woman from HR. She handed over a folder and Vince passed it to Darren. "Final report," he said. "Turnovers slowed. Exit interviews from last month all mention positive changes. One applicant drove 2 towns over just to apply here, said she heard staff were treated right." Darren flipped through the folder. "We've got 2 part-time roles still open?" "Correct. But no one's being overworked to cover them. We've been adjusting shifts instead of stretching people thin." "Good. And what about conflict resolution protocols implemented? Any complaints go directly to regional now, no more getting buried in store." Darren nodded. "Keep it that way." After the HR rep left, Vince lowered his voice slightly. "You planning to do this at the other locations?" "I've already started. Each store will see me eventually. You think you can catch everything?" "No, but I can make sure people know I'm watching. That I care about how we operate when no one's looking." Vince didn't respond, but the way he stood straighter said more than words. Darren walked the floor one last time before leaving. He passed the bakery, where a teenager was carefully icing cupcakes under Gloria's watchful eye. He passed the cleaning aisle, where an older janitor was wiping down a spill without being prompted. He passed a customer asking for help, and this time, someone responded right away. There was no announcement, no applause, no staged moment, just a store doing what it was supposed to do. Outside, the air had cooled slightly. The sun was still high, but the shadows stretched longer now. Darren stood near the cart corral, watching the flow of customers in and out. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt responsible, because fixing one store wasn't the goal. The goal was making sure none of them ever slipped that far again. He opened his phone and pulled up a blank memo. Quarterly walkthroughs, unscheduled, conversations, not inspections. Start with store 3. He saved the note, slid the phone back in his pocket, and stepped away from the building, not as a stranger, not as a hidden observer, but as a leader, one who'd finally decided to show up.